gentlemen, a praise silence for Mr. G. Bradman.
In the 1930s and 40s, Don Bradman was a national hero. The boy from the bush who became famous around the world through his genius for cricket. His average in test was 99.94. The measure of his class is that of the world's great batsmen, no one other than Bradman has averaged more than 61 in test cricket. Aged 81 when this interview was filmed, he agreed to the interview because it is to accompany a collection of cricket film which is being made for the Bradman Museum in Bowral, where he grew up. Sir Donald, what are your first memories of cricket?
Oh, my first memories, I suppose, are when I was going to the Bowral High School and playing with the other little kids in the playground with the bell post as a wicket and things like that. We had really no organised cricket in those days. We just played around amongst ourselves. And
your first big score?
Well, my first score in a match of any consequence was when we played a team from a neighbouring town, and that was, in fact, played on a concrete pitch which was situated about 100 yards from the present turf pitch in the Bradman Oval. It's still in the same area. It wasn't called the Bradman Oval then, but it was very close to where it is today. And my memory is I think I got about 112 or 115 in that particular match, and got into terrible trouble the next day with the headmaster because I'd left one of the bats behind.
In the early 1930s, Bradman reenacted for the camera his boyhood practice routines, hitting a golf ball with a cricket stump against the side of a corrugated iron tank, and catching practice with the aid of a paling fence.
In retrospect, it was significant, but of course at the time when I was doing it, it had no meaning at all for me other than the fact that I was just enjoying myself. It never entered my head that I was probably training my eyesight and coordinating my movements. That didn't register at all in those days. Now, of course, I can realise what the significance of it was.
How old were you when you left school, and what did you do then?
Well, I was 14 when I left school, and I went to work in a real estate agent's office in Bowral. Well, my father and mother really organised this for me. I didn't organise what I was going to do. We had to take customers out to look at properties. We handled properties in the city or in the town as well as in the country, farms and what have you. We had a number of houses that we looked after for people, and we had to collect the rents. I had to go around and collect the rents. And we had to deal with people who came into the office, and we ran a furniture mart where my boss used to conduct auctions of furniture and other artefacts, probably about once a month.
And at that stage, were you playing a lot of cricket in your early...
No, I was playing none at all. See, as I told you before, we had virtually no organised cricket at school, although I did play 2 or 3 matches against neighbouring teams. But when I left school at 14, I didn't play cricket at all. I had a favourite uncle who had a place nearby with a tennis court, and I used to go and play tennis, and it was not until, I think, about 18 months after I left school that I first came back and played cricket of any sort at all.
Then in 1925-26, you played for Bowral, and during that season you had the celebrated duel with Bill O'Reilly.
Well, that was really the second year. The previous season I had come back and I had played 2 or 3 matches at the end of the summer. And the following summer I began to play cricket right from from the word go, and that was the season in which I played against Bill O'Reilly.
To listen to Bill O'Reilly tell that story, and it's a famous story, he'd have had you caught in the slips if it hadn't been for the fact that a man called Selby Davidson had been lighting his pipe.
That's one of the most lovely stories of all time in cricket. I'm afraid it's not strictly true. You can hardly imagine a fellow lighting his pipe and being covered by blue smoke while the bowler's running up to bowl, can you? But it does make a wonderful story. Now, it's quite true that I did get missed in the slips, but not because he was lighting his pipe.
Don Bradman was 16 when he took the game up in earnest. And it wasn't long before his performances in the local competition caught the attention of the New South Wales Cricket Association.
Don came down from Bowral in 1926 to the Sydney Cricket Ground in the practice nets. When he came down from Bowral, he impressed everybody by his superb confidence, and the selectors were equally impressed because they picked him within 12 months to go down to Adelaide and Melbourne. He scored a century in his first appearance at Adelaide. It was a remarkable performance, and what do you think, in 12 months' time he had the distinction and the honour of playing as a youngster, 18, a mere youth, in the first Test match for Australia at Brisbane in November 1928.
That's obviously a shot of the exhibition ground where the Test match was played in 28-9. That's Ponsford and Woodfull going out to bat for Australia. Oh, a splendid shot of Morris Tate. Notice how after he delivers the ball, he hitches his tie up around his waist.
He was LBW to Morris Tate for 18 in his first Test innings. Australia collapsed in the second innings. Their total was 66. Bradman made only 1.
All out 66. Well, of course, we got caught on a wet wicket. In those days, the pitches were uncovered. Rained overnight. And I'd never seen a wet wicket in my life before I went out to bat that day. Didn't know what they were like. My recollection is that I only faced 2 balls. The first one was a bit short of a length and I got a single off it. And the next one, of course, popped up and I was caught.
Bradman was 12th man in the second Test, but he returned to the 11th and made his first Test century in the 3rd game of the series. Australia lost the first 4 Tests of that 1928-29 series. They finally recorded a win in the 5th Test, played in Melbourne. With scores of 123 and 37 not out in Melbourne, it was becoming clear that Bradman was a batsman of world class. His average for the series was 66.86. Here, he's facing the English fast bowler Harold Larwood, of whom we'll hear more later.
England had, in my opinion, one of the greatest 11s that she had ever put in the field. But they were mostly men who were getting to the end of their careers. Australia was exactly the opposite, in that we had some old players who were fading from the scene and we had to replace them with youngsters. So really, 28-9 was about the end of an era, and we had to start and build up a new side. I was working for a real estate firm in Bowral as a boy. In due course, that firm opened an office in Sydney, also in the real estate field. And my boss offered me a position with that firm, which I happily took because it enabled me to go to Sydney and to play cricket down there. But we were running into the 1929-30 depression period, and the business was not successful and they had to close it down. So I suddenly found myself without a job. And I agreed then to take a position with Mick Simmons, the sporting goods people. I did a contract and went to work for them for 3 years, from 1929 to 32. They had travellers going out into they had one traveller doing the north, one the south, one the west and so on. And I would go with these travellers to visit sports stores in the various country centres, and they would organise for me to give an exhibition of batting at the local school or something like that.
In 1929-30, Bradman broke his own record of runs scored in a Sheffield Shield season. He made 894, including the then world record score in first-class cricket of 452, not out. Do you think you had a different attitude to making big scores than cricketers who'd gone before?
No, I don't think so. I think if you go through history, you'll find that a lot of players, including even Victor Trumper, had made scores of 200-odd, 300-odd, and so on prior to that. And, of course, Ponsford, just before me, made 2 scores of over 400. I think the only man who's ever done that. But one of the things that is overlooked usually is the time factor involved. It's the speed with which you score the runs that is a very important factor. The world's record score that I made, that 452, was made in a little over 400 minutes. Now, there are lots and lots and lots of people who batted for longer than that, but they didn't make as many runs because they didn't score at the same pace.
His place in the Australian team to tour England in 1930 was assured.
It was a tremendous adventure, of course, and I enjoyed it, except for the fact that I was one of the worst sailors who was ever born. I used to get seasick before I got on the boat. But when you're way out in the middle of the Indian Ocean or somewhere and it's very calm, it's a marvellous life. You play deck sports of all descriptions. You can go for a swim in the pool and laze in the sun and so on. It's a wonderful experience, wonderful holiday. Playing golf with Glen Billy Woodfull hitting off. They gave us a little speech of welcome, and Billy replied, and he said, when I come up here, you know, it's not a question of replace the turf, it's a question of returfing the place. The film said getting accustomed to wet wickets. I don't know why wet wickets, because we were not batting on wet wickets, we were batting on perfectly normal English pitches. That's my little friend Archie Jackson there. Stan McCabe, Charlie Walker. Well, Charlie lost his life in the war, very sad. Bill Ponsford.
Bates bowling for Bradman. He got him in his last innings. He seems more comfortable today. Nice legs, stroke dead.
Some of the English critics said that because Bradman played across the line of the ball and scored many of his runs with the pull shot, he wouldn't succeed on the softer English pitches. In the first test, he made 8 and 131. In the second, 254 and 1.
England have never won a test on this ground yet. But it doesn't look like they're going to win this one the way Bradman is batting. Every time he scores something. Hardly a ball gone in this over it he hasn't scored from. Bradman's 199. That's his 200. Well done.
In the third game, he made the then world record score in tests. 334 runs, 309 of them in one day.
They're all surrounding him and patting him on the back.
Hello.
How are you enjoying your trip to England?
Oh, having a great time, thanks.
That's the idea.
We're just having a wonderful time. The people are treating us so well that we're wondering we don't like going back home hardly enough. It's a wonderful time. But we find we're having a good deal of trouble with the weather. I don't think it's been a good summer. It's been dull, rainy most of the time. In fact, we've only had about one decent month all the time we've been here. And that was about the second month after we arrived. Then, of course, with the dull weather, it makes cricket much harder. We're used to a very bright light, middle of summer, the hot weather. And when you get on these dull conditions, it makes it very awkward for you to see the ball. And I try and get as many runs as I possibly can. And if in getting those runs I should happen to break any record, well, naturally, I'm very pleased, but I do not deliberately set out to try and break records.
That's fine. That's fine. Well, the best of luck in the The 5th Test match, anyway.
That's what we're hoping to win, but still, may the best team win, that's all we are.
That's it.
This is the scene of the final test match, played at the Oval. England's first innings closed for 405. The batting seemed to break down after Sutcliffe left, and on this good wicket, the Australians may make just as much as we did in their first innings, if not more.
Quite a big crowd here again this morning. This looks like being a record for attendance. Tate is having his shoe seen to. He's got some dirt in it. Boy, Bradman is very interesting onlooker. Bradman is batting to Hammond now. That gives Australia 300 runs on the board, with only 3 wickets down. Peebles is bowling to Bradman. That gives Bradman 99. Bradman's batting to Larwood. That gives him his century.
He went on to make 232 in the 5th Test and a total of 974 runs in the series at an average of 139.14.
We went over as, I suppose you'd say, the underdogs of that tour. We'd been badly defeated in 28-9 in Australia. And we were a very young side, hadn't had much experience under English conditions. I think it was generally thought that we would lose the 1930 series. But I believe our players got used to the conditions quickly and we improved rapidly as the tour went on. Conversely, England had lost some of the older players who'd been out here in 28-9 and had to bring in some fresh blood. And before the tour was over, we were distinctly the better side.
The Australian team returned home in triumph. Bradman's employers arranged appearances for him throughout Australia on his way home. Crowds turned out to greet him everywhere he went. The Test cricketers were the sporting superstars of the day. Bradman was filmed returning to his parents' home in Bowral. Some of the players who had toured England in 1930 featured in one of the first talking films ever made in Australia.
And now let us see the Prince of Batsmen in action. Don Bradman, just come to man's estate and already known as the most phenomenal run-getting machine the world has ever seen. Here's a bird's-eye view of the great batsman in action, the slow-motion camera giving you every detail of his movements. In addition to being the world's greatest batsman, he is a remarkable fieldsman. Like a flash, and bang goes the wicket.
Mr. Woodfall had something to say about records that have come my way. It must always be remembered that for a batsman to break a record, someone has got to stay at the other end. A batting genius could not get anywhere without the support of his teammates to hold the fort and keep his innings alive. Therefore, any plaudits that come my way for record breaking must be shared by my teammates who so efficiently supported me throughout.
Were you a frustrated bowler?
No, I think instead of being frustrated, I was just the reverse. I was always hoping that they would not put me on the bowl. I never professed to be a good bowler, although I got a lot of wickets in the country as a boy. That was on concrete pitches with coir mats where you could turn the ball a lot, and obviously the standard of play wasn't that high. But as far as first-class cricket was concerned, I never considered myself as a bowler, and perfectly happy to to be just classified as a batsman and leave the bowling to somebody else who knew what he was doing.
The West Indies came to Australia for the first time in the summer of 1930-31.
This match, of course, was on the Sydney Cricket Ground, which in those days I thought was the most beautiful ground in the world. And that looks like Constantine bowling. Yes, he was a very volatile and unpredictable character. Little bit like Keith Miller in a way, had a great flair for the game. They were a very interesting and pleasant lot of characters, the West Indians, but of course nothing like as good in those days as the great West Indian teams of recent years.
The South Africans are taking the field in their game against New South Wales. Bell, the South African fast bowler, bowling to Bradman.
Bradman's contract with Mick Simmons was due to finish. Work was hard to get, and it was often difficult for cricketers to make ends meet. On the field, he had a successful series against South Africa in 1931-32, with 2 double centuries and a test average of 201.5.
It was a very pleasant series because the South Africans were a wonderful batch of fellows and we got on marvellously well with them. But as a team, they really were not quite a match for Australia. For a test match in Australia, my recollection is we got £25, which would be equivalent to $50 in today's money. That, of course, was for the whole match, no matter how long it lasted. And I certainly played in one match, which went into the 8th day, and you didn't play on Sunday. So you were away. If I was living in Sydney, for instance, and the match was played in Melbourne, I would be away from home for perhaps 10, 11 days. In Shield cricket, we got 10 shillings a day. That is $1 a day, plus our expenses. I had been working for Mick Simmons in a 3-year contract. And that contract was due to run out at the beginning of 1932. I was then engaged to be married and intending to get married in April 32. And I didn't want to have a career that was dependent upon sport. I'd always had this in the back of my mind that I wanted sport to be a recreation. I wanted to play it for pleasure and not be a professional and not play it for a living. But we ran into this terrible depression in Australia in the late 1920s, early 1930s. People today would probably find it very hard to know how bad things were in the Australian economy in those days. And it was very difficult indeed to get employment.
The offer I received to go to England was a very good one. At the same time, I felt that I would like to remain in Australia if it was possible for me to do so.
I didn't have qualifications. I wasn't an accountant, I wasn't a solicitor, I hadn't gone through university, so I didn't have something to fall back on. And what was I going to do? So for that reason, I had to very seriously consider the offer to go to England and play professional cricket.
3 prominent Australian business concerns made me a combined offer of a contract to remain here, which I accepted in preference to going home to the old country.
But in the end, the local people, that is F.J. Palmer, the sports outfitters in Sydney, 2UE radio station and the newspaper, made me a 3-way offer in which I could do something for each of them. They guaranteed me 2 years, and at the end of that time, I would be able to look around and see what I could do. It gave me a bit of breathing space to think about the future. Jessie and I, as I said, came to school through here every day. She didn't know it. I think I was then, not sure whether it was 11 or 12, but I decided to marry her. I didn't ask her. I didn't ask her, I was too shy. But eventually I got around to it after about another 10 years. And so formed the best partnership of my life. We rented a half of a two-storey house at McMahon's Point, which is just off the northern end of the Sydney Harbour Bridge. And I used to come to work each day on a little ferry which chugged along under the bridge into Circular Quay. A very pleasant little spot. We had our own swimming pool in the Sydney Harbour, as a matter of fact, down the bottom of the front garden.
And you had an unusual honeymoon.
Well, that was accidental in a way. Arthur Maley had tried to arrange a tour of Canada and the United States of America, and I wasn't anxious to go, but on the other hand, Arthur said to me, now look, this tour is totally conditional upon your coming and being a member of the party. If you don't play, the tour is off. And so this really put me on a bit of a spot, you see, so I consulted with my employers, and they said that was all right, they'd give me the time off to go if I wanted to go, and of course it would be a wonderful opportunity to see Canada and the USA, and an opportunity also for my wife as well to be in the party and have a good holiday. So in the end I decided to go on the trip, and I never regretted it. It was a very enjoyable, very exciting period.
The summer of 1932-33 brought the first real setbacks of Don Bradman's career. First, his employment contract was threatened because it breached the Cricket Board's rules on players writing about the game.
They did have a rule that a player could write for the press with the permission of the board chairman. Now, in my case, I thought this was purely a formality. I only had to apply and it would be granted. But when I did apply, the chairman informed me that the rule said that he could only give permission to someone whose full-time occupation was that of a journalist. Well, of course, mine wasn't, because I had two other things as well. And so they refused to give me permission to write. That placed me in a totally untenable position that I had never anticipated. But I immediately said, well, come what may, I am going to honour my contract. Even if it means my retirement from cricket altogether and I can't play, I'm going to honour my contract. And that was the position, and that would have stood, except that the newspaper concerned found itself also in a very difficult situation, in that if they made me adhere to that contract, or if I did adhere to that contract, they would then be held responsible for putting me out of Test cricket. I wouldn't play for Australia. So in the end, they came along to me and said, look, we want you to play for Australia, we prefer you to play for Australia, instead of writing this Test series.
Bradman's supremacy on the cricket field was challenged too by the bodyline tactics devised by England's captain, Douglas Jardine, and spearheaded by Harold Larwood, the fastest of the four pace bowlers in the England team. Jardine's dislike of Australians went back to 1921, when the touring Australian team had stopped him from getting a century for Oxford University by keeping him away from the strike. In 1932-33, Jardine packed most of his fieldsmen on the leg side and instructed his fast bowlers to bowl bounces at the batsman's body. Bodyline was devised to curb Bradman's dominance. They didn't bowl it all the time, but when they did, it was devastating. It was also, by any normal standards of sportsmanship, unthinkable.
We were very upset, of course, with the tactics they were using, and there was no way that we would have retaliated. Our skipper, Bill Woodfull, would never have used those tactics under any circumstances, any more than Gubby Allen would on the English side. He refused to bowl them. The difficulty was how you're going to counteract them. You see, with 7 fieldsmen on the leg side, plus the wicketkeeper, plus the bowler, that makes 9 fielders. You've only got 2 men on the offside, and the ball is being directed towards your body. There is virtually nowhere to go there's nothing you can do. If you play defensively, you get caught by one of the short legs close up. If you play the hook shots, you get caught by somebody out on the fence. And, of course, there was also a very real danger, physical danger, to the players who were not very fast or very fleet of foot. We were upset about what they did. That showed you very clearly the direction of the ball. You see, I'm standing on the leg side. Now, I move over to the offside. If I had stood exactly where I was, that ball would have hit me in the chest. This one, I'm afraid, a little bit higher than the chest. I wore the normal protective padding with a thigh pad on the left-hand side, which, of course, is standard practice today. No, boys never go out to bat without that on against the fast bowlers. But I did one extra thing, and that is that I had a rubber pad made. It was rather kidney-shaped pad that fitted over my chest. Came around under the heart on the left-hand side and around there with a piece of elastic around my neck to hold it in place. That was the only additional padding that I used. And the extraordinary part was that it was all for nothing because I never got hit. I only got hit once in the series, and that was on the upper muscle of the left arm. But I never once in the whole series got hit on the body. And this was a very emotional match because, you see, I'd not played in the first test match due to illness. And I had come back into this second game, and I think everybody was expecting that I might put up a good performance. Anyhow, as I went out to bat, I seemed to have a premonition that Bill Bowes was going to bowl me a bumper. So I set myself to play the shot, and sure enough, he bowled it exactly where I expected he would, and I played the shot as I intended to play, but by a miracle, pulled it down from about chest high onto the base of my leg stump. I could try it 1,000 times again, and I couldn't do it. And that was the end of it.
Bradman scored 103 not out in the second innings of that second test. It was his only century of the series. His average was 56.57. England won back the Ashes in the fourth test, played in Brisbane.
The fourth test match in which England recaptured the Ashes is laid at Brisbane. Here in Queensland is really semi-tropical country, and the sun blazes down from the cloudless sky like a molten ball of fire on this, the hottest day of the tour. Again, Australia are lucky with the toss, and the MCC take the field. Closely followed by the opening batsman, Woodfall, nearest the camera, and Victor Richardson. In the boiling heat, Larwood opens his shock attack, bowling first the orthodox off theory. Runs, however, come with slow assurance, and Larwood reverts to his leg theory, which the crowd mildly resents. Australia's first wicket stand ended at 133 with Richardson's departure, and Bradman appears. He is not very comfortable against Larwood, but he knocks up a useful 76 before being dismissed.
It was obvious that it was something that was not going to last. It only had a limited life before it stopped. And we were all very relieved, I think, when the season was over and we got back to normal cricket again.
Did you get to know Douglas Jardine later in life?
Not very well. The nearest I got to him was that after my career was finished, I did a tour of England as a journalist, and consequently was in the press box each day writing my stuff for the newspaper. And so happened that Jardine was sitting next to me in the press box. And obviously we would have to say good morning to one another when we arrived, but there wasn't very much conversation during the day. We would occasionally have an argument about what happened on the field. He would say one thing and I would say something else. But that really was the only contact I had with him socially.
In general, in those days, did the members of opposing teams see a reasonable amount of each other off the field and become good friends?
Yes, they did, very much indeed. With the exception of this 1932-3 tour, that was one of the tragedies of the whole thing, that it set up an enmity between the players, and you didn't have this fraternisation off the field that you would normally have. But under ordinary circumstances, not only did we mix freely, but we formed enormous friendships to the extent that, in one case, at R.W.B. Robbins of England, my wife became the godmother of one of his children, and his wife became the godmother of one of my children. You know, the families were so close together.
The largest crowd that has ever witnessed a match at the Sydney Cricket Ground has gathered to see the final game of the season between Victoria and New South Wales for the Sheffield Shield. New South Wales has won the toss, and after Fingleton has retired hurt with 78 runs to his credit, Bradman and Brown have become associated in a quick-scoring partnership. This is Victoria's fast bowler McCormick sending one down to Bradman. The ball is pitched off the wicket and Bradman scores an easy single, giving Brown the strike. Although only 19 years old, Brown is one of the stars of the New South Wales team, and in this match he is giving his best display so far. As his score climbs towards the century, Brown plays the bowling with ease and confidence.
I was batting when Don came to the wickets, and he said to me, "Bill, you're about 70, I think I was." He said, "Now, you must get your 100 before the new ball," which came on at 200 runs then, irrespective. So he said, "I'll give you all the strike." He said, "You just go ahead," which he did, and I think he got 11 or 12 singles, while I was able to get the necessary runs just before the new ball came on. I think I was 103, he was about 15, something like that. And when the new ball came on, and when I was 128, he was 129. I'll give you some idea of the rate at which he scored, and that was with the new ball and all. A marvellous exhibition of batting.
As a contrast to McCormick, the slow left-hander Fleetwood Smith comes on to bowl to Bradman, who in previous matches has scored many runs off the Victorian bowler.
This is the match between the New South Wales and Victoria at the Sydney Cricket Ground in 1934. I had a bit of a field day on that occasion because I took the long handle to Fleetwood Smith, and if my memory doesn't play me false, I think I hit 5 sixes in that innings, whereas I'd never hit a six before in a first-class match. That was when I was having a go towards the finish, and I was trying to get out, as a matter of fact, and I hit a very easy catch to somebody in the outfield, and he dropped me, so I had to repeat it all over again. Got caught the next time. You see, it's perfectly obvious is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get out. And I made sure that Fleetwood Smith got my wicket. Anyway, that evening we put it all right because my wife and I invited Fleetwood out to our home to dinner. We had a very pleasant meal together. I was always concerned that I did not want to lead the life of a professional cricketer, dependent on cricket for a living. I wanted to get some business career of my own that was outside sport. And Mr. Hodgett, who was a member of the Australian Cricket Board and a leading figure in the South Australian Cricket Association, approached me and said if I came to Adelaide, he would give me a contract which would guarantee me a position with his firm for 6 years, would allow me time off to play cricket, and would teach me the business of stock and share broking. Now, this was an offer that was too good to refuse. I didn't understand the business of stock and share broking at the time, but I was always interested in figures, mathematics, and so on. It appealed to me very much, and so I signed a contract with him, and that was that.
The liner Orford docks at Southampton at the end of her voyage from Australia, and among her passengers are 9 members of the Test team, consisting of Woodfull, Bradman, Ponsford, Grimmett, Wall, Darling, Ebeling, Fleetwood Smith and O'Reilly. Woodfull, the captain, looks fit despite the rough passage across the bay. Bradman, a little thinner than when last here, is also glad to be in the old country again.
Before we left Australia in 1934, I was examined, of course, by the board doctor, and I was passed by him as fit to go on the tour. But I was not well. I couldn't tell you what was the matter with me. I just felt off colour. I used to get very bad headaches, and I felt there was some doubt as to whether I was well enough to go on the tour. And therefore, at my own expense, I went to the leading physician in Adelaide and asked him to give me a thorough examination to see if he could find anything wrong. He didn't find anything, but he did say that I was very run down and he thought that I was badly in need of a rest. And he said that although he would agree that I could go on the tour, he didn't wish me to play in any matches at all before we got to England. And I was still very unwell when I got to England, and I was still very off colour in the early matches of the tour. I knew I wasn't right, but nobody could find out what was the matter with me.
Bradman's health seemed to improve for a time, and he found his form in the fourth test, where he scored a triple century, again at Leeds, and with Bill Ponsford put on 388 in a record fourth-wicket partnership. In the fifth test, Bradman made 244 and Ponsford 266. Their partnership of 451 was the highest ever made in Test cricket. Although it has been equalled since, it's never been bettered.
To the Oval come all those thousands who intend to see the destination of the Ashes decided in the fifth and final match, the timeless test. Ponsford, the hero of many a match, reaches his fifth test century. Not long afterwards, the crowd is cheering Bradman for his 100. A quick single is nearly too quick for Ponsford. Don has now overhauled his partner and gets his 200. Then Ponsford. Still together, they set up the world's record partnership for any wicket, beating Hobbs and Rhodes' stand of 323 at Melbourne in 1912.
I think by the end of the tour, we had, to a very large extent, got over the unpleasantness that had happened in Australia in 32-3, and we were a very united and very happy side, and of course we played quite well. The diagnosis was that I had appendicitis, and it turned into peritonitis. And in those days, you didn't have penicillin, you didn't have the modern antibiotics, and it was a very serious business. And I was actually in hospital for 5 weeks.
Is it true that Lady Bradman heard that you'd died?
She heard it in Australia before she left. As soon as they found out that I was so ill, they communicated with her, and she said, well, I'll go to London straight away. And arrangements were made for her to go, and she was in Sydney at the time. But to catch the boat to England, she had to go by train to Melbourne, and then from Melbourne across to Perth to pick up the boat. And it was when she was in Melbourne that she heard this rumour that I had died. And she's a woman with a rather optimistic view of life, and she refused to believe it. And so she said, well, I want to ring the hospital and find out. And they rang the hospital straight away, and she spoke to the doctor. And, of course, I wasn't dead, I was still alive, and so she went on with the voyage.
Mrs. Bradman, followed by Don, leaves her hotel en route to catch the boat train at Victoria on their way back to Australia. It will be remembered that Mrs. Bradman rushed to England when her husband's health gave cause for anxiety after his operation for appendicitis. Now he is fit and cheery once more, but inclined to be reticent when questioned as to how soon he expects to be playing cricket again.
I was in such a run-down condition at that stage that the doctors refused to give me all clear to go to South Africa in 1935-6, so I missed an international tour which didn't take place for nearly 12 months afterwards.
England, led by Gubby Allen, toured Australia in 1936-37. His illness behind him, Don Bradman took over the Australian captaincy.
I was a most inexperienced captain, and it wasn't an easy job. But you've got to take time to get into these things and find your feet. This was always a great point of contention between Gubby Allen and me. The first test in Brisbane, we had to get a score of, I think it was between 300 and 400 on the last day to win the match. But it rained, and of course we got caught on a sticky wicket and we lost the match. Now I say that we would have got the runs if it hadn't rained. Allen said we had no chance of getting the runs, and they would have won it anyway. But for sure we lost the match because it rained. There was no argument about that. Then in the second test in Sydney, England won the toss and made a very big score. There was no way we were ever going to win the match from that stage on. But again, it rained. We got caught on a sticky wicket again, and we lost because of the rain. I said we couldn't have won the match, but at least I think we could have saved it. We could have made a draw. But because of the rain, we were 2 down.
Bradman had lost his first 2 tests as captain. There was talk of disloyalty in the Australian team. Questions were asked about his leadership. He answered them with scores of 270, 212 and 169 in the last 3 tests of the series.
We won the 3rd test because the rain came and favoured us. We got the benefit of it. The Adelaide match was the only one played which was not interfered with by rain. It was a very close, very exciting affair. We won it. And we got to the 5th test match, all square.
Melbourne, and the 5th test opens with Bradman and Allen tossing, and Bradman wins for the 3rd consecutive time. Don's happy smile was reflected on every Australian's face. Close to Reid, who partners Fingleton in opening for Australia. And away it goes for 2. This pair did their job in defying England's speed attack, and then entered Don Bradman, greatest batsman the world has known. Stan McKay brilliantly onto a glorious century. Hammond to Bradman, a single, and Don reaches the 100, equaling Hobbs' record of 12 test centuries in the England-Australia series. Almost 80,000 people hail the champion. Allen to Badcock, and a thrill. The English skipper misses a catch off his own bowling, his 3rd offence in the match. Barnes bowls Fleetwood Smith, and Australia has totaled 604. The English openers, Barnett and Wellington. Nash to Barnett. Watch Oldfield. A beautiful catch, and is out. Fleetwood Smith almost embraces Oldfield with delight. Fleetwood Smith to Hardstaff, who was unfortunate in missing his century. And now Fleetwood Smith to Hammond. Even this champion couldn't stop the drift. Hope's crash as Allen goes, caught by wicket-keeper Oldfield off net. And now Oldfield again. He stumps Bose off a typically guileful ball from O'Reilly. It can't be long now, and it won't, with the tail enders figuring in the quickest of collapses. There's one gone. And another. 2 balls, 2 wickets. England's beaten by an innings and plenty.
In the final analysis, I say we lost 2 matches because of the rain. We won 2 matches because of the rain. And the 5th one, which was played in Adelaide, without any rain, we won that on our merits. So I think the final result was a fair judgment on the capacity of the two sides.
I think he was the best tactical captain I've ever played under. He never missed a trick. He was right up with the new ball. He knew all about the opposition batsman. He placed his field accordingly. He remembered things that happened in previous matches. And when the new ball was due, the bowlers were rested and ready. And he had a wonderful appreciation of the conditions. I'd say in the vernacular that he just never missed a trick on the field.
Do you think captaincy with the demands of the media is harder now than it was in your day?
I would think it must be. The demands of captaincy have always been great, naturally. The captain has a responsibility for all sorts of things, the tactics on the field, the behaviour off the field, and so on and so forth. But I surely couldn't have been under the same pressure going back in 1936 without television and so on as the captains are today, where at the end of every day's play they've got to have a press conference and explain away all sorts of things. I don't think there's any doubt it must be a tougher climate in which they operate.
Oh, yes, there is something you can do for me. You can give me a seat for the cricket match this afternoon. I have a hunch you're going to bowl Bradman, and I'd kind of like to see you do it.
No such luck, I'm afraid. Still, you can have a seat if you'd like one.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Making a fool of yourself.
The trip to England in 1938 took the Australian team through Colombo and the Middle East. To Italy, where they saw the Italian Navy preparing for the war which was soon to come. And to Paris, Switzerland, and finally, London.
Your Excellencies, the Lords and Gentlemen, a pray silence for Mr. G. Bradman.
My Lord Chairman, Your Excellencies, my Lords, Mr. Lucien Gore, and gentlemen, if I had my own way at this moment, I would appeal very vigorously against the light. The Australians are going to try, as far as possible, to give you bright and attractive cricket. To do that, of course, it is necessary for both sides to cooperate.
38 was a difficult tour. I felt that our bowling was not as strong as it had been on some previous occasions, and I felt that I had a very great responsibility as captain of the team, and I had to work very hard to try and hold us together in a few matches. I would say that that was probably the most difficult of the 4 tours that I had in England. We got out of it in the end with an honourable draw, but we were not a tremendously powerful side.
Australia had only 2 reliable bowlers, McCormick and the great Bill O'Reilly. England, with the newcomers Edrich, Compton and Len Hutton, had a very strong batting side. They made 658 in the first innings of the first test. Australia had no option but to try to hold on for a draw.
Singleton and Brown face a heavy task. Barnes open, but like England, Australia take a single off the first ball. Wright burning his fast leg breaks gives England an early success, but there's Bradman to reckon with, and Don goes all out to put runs on the board. He puts 50 to his own name.
Farms bowling to Bradman. It's a short ball. Bradman moves back and pulls fiercely past square leg. Hutton running around from deep fine leg has no chance as the ball goes under the ropes for another 4. That's 4 more to Bradman, a typical Bradman shot, giving the fieldsman no chance of saving the boundary.
Then Sinfield does the trick, getting him caught by Ames.
The feature of the game, from Australia's point of view, was Stan McCabe's brilliant double century.
That's Stan McCabe. It was the greatest innings that I ever saw anyone play, and I don't think it would be possible for anybody to play better than Stan played that particular innings. At one stage I was up in the Australian dressing room and I called out to some of the boys who were in the back of the room to come and have a look at it, because I said, you'll never see anything like this again. He and Fleetwood Smith put on 77 runs for the last wicket in, I think it was 25 minutes. And the Englishmen had 5 men on the boundary all that time and were trying to deprive him of his strike.
In Australia's second innings, Bradman made a patient 144. He was concentrating on defence, but watch his footwork.
There was no earthly chance of us winning the match, and when we came to bat in the second innings, I said to the boys, now, we can't possibly let Stan McCabe down. We can't win this match, but we have got to save it. And so we did. Fortunately, we made a draw out of it.
During the second test, played at Lord's, the Australian players were presented to King George VI. This game was drawn too, and the third test was washed out without a ball being bowled. Australia won by 5 wickets at Leeds and were 1 up with only 1 test to play. In the final test at the Oval, England won the toss and batted first.
Of all the records broken in this test, one excites the Oval crowd most, the beating of Bradman's highest ever test score. Here's a historic stroke that does it. Bradman is first to congratulate Hutton. Bradman, trying everything, puts himself on to bowl.
To give a little bit of relief to our bowlers, I decided to bowl a few overs myself. Because the ground was soft, big holes had been dug where the bowlers' feet had been landing.
Then, as if Australia weren't in trouble already, Bradman has to be carried off the field by White and Fleetwood Smith. Bradman out of the test and Fingleton, and that's England's total.
I put my foot on the edge of one of these holes and went over on my ankle and chipped a bone in the ankle and had to go off, and I didn't play again on the whole tour.
He was 30 years old. It would be 8 years before he played in another test match. He had a successful Sheffield Shield season, including 6 centuries in a row in 1938-39, but by the time he resumed after the Second World War, his best years as a batsman were behind him. There's no simple secret to a success like Don Bradman's. Hours and hours of practice are one essential, but success comes from a combination of all the skills. He thought and moved very quickly. His coordination was superb. His judgment of what he could do was almost perfect. He made a huge number of runs with the pull shot. It's not the most attractive shot in cricket, but it's one of the most effective when it's well played. Bradman perfected it. If the ball was short, most of the time it was bang, 4 runs. But he had all the other shots too, and when people who know cricket see film of him, the shots that make them sigh with envy are the deflections, the leg glances and the late cuts. Above all, perhaps, and this is what the people who played with him say about him, he had a supreme confidence in his ability to see and judge things for what they are. How much of cricket is physical and how much is mental, do you think?
I suppose a lot of it is mental, although that never intruded in my particular play. In other words, I didn't let the mental side of it worry me. I always had confidence in my own ability. If I made a mistake, I felt that 9 times out of 10 it was a physical mistake, that I had tried to do something and I didn't get there in time. I was too slow or something like that. But I'm sure with a lot of players, their mental attitude is terribly important. They imagine there are difficulties that are not really there.
Do you think there's more emphasis on the mental side of the game now than there was in your day?
There probably is, for the reason that I think there's a great deal more pressure on the players to perform. You see, it is so professional today that it is much more important that a player succeeds for the benefit of his own career. He's normally playing for very substantial financial reward, whereas in our day the financial reward wasn't a consideration at all. It didn't come into it. So yes, I think that the mental side of today is probably much more severe than it used to be.
In the Sheffield Shield match between South Australia and New South Wales at Sydney Cricket Ground, Don Bradman appears as wicketkeeper, and he keeps them well to Clary Grimmett's bowling. But the great interest of this match is Bradman's innings, in which he hopes to score his 6th successive century in first-class cricket, and so the record will bear the Bradman brand.
No bowler was spared from Bradman's perfect footwork, majestic drives, and uncanny timing. This day, Bradman equaled Fry's record, but failed to beat it in his next appearance when he was bowled for 5.
I joined the Air Force, and they had more recruits than they could use. When the Army said that they could use me straight away if I could be transferred from Air Force to the Army. And the authorities agreed to that happening, and so I went straight away into service with the Army. But I suffered from a thing called fibrositis. I'd had it before, but I had never had it as seriously as I did then. I think the tremendously heavy physical duties that I had to perform in the Army sparked it off, and ultimately I had to be boarded out. I couldn't carry on, and I had to have another 3 months convalescence up on my wife's father's farm in New South Wales before I could come back into circulation again.
Don and Jessie Bradman's son John was born in 1939, and their daughter Shirley was born in 1941. To add to his responsibilities, Bradman's employer, Harry Hodgetts, went broke in 1945, and Bradman set up his own business as a stockbroker in Adelaide.
At that time, I honestly did not think that I would play first-class cricket again. But you want to cast your mind back to the euphoria that existed in the community with the end of the war. and particularly in England, they were very, very anxious to get cricket started again, to give them some relief from the conditions that they'd endured for several years. So there was tremendous pressure on the sporting authorities to get cricket in particular going again. And that was really why England agreed to come out to Australia in 46, 47, even though the authorities, I think, felt it was probably a little bit early and they were not quite ready for it. They still saw the necessity to get cricket started for the sake of the public. We, of course, agreed to meet them, and then I personally was under very great pressure to play, and it was with a great deal of reluctance that I consented, and I said, well, I'll try, and I'll see how I perform. And I think I had a good piece of luck in the first test match. I might have been out fairly early, but managed to go on and make a century. And I saw the year through, but even then, at that point, I thought it was probably going to be my last year in first-class cricket. The fact that I went on and played another couple of years was more or less an accident, but I didn't think I was ever 100% in 46-7.
The Australian team after the war had young players like Keith Miller, Ray Lindwall, Arthur Morris and Don Talon, who went on to be included among the greats of the game. Nevertheless, Bradman topped the aggregates in the 1946-47 season with 680 runs and the averages with 97.14. Here, he's caught and bowled by Norman Yardley for 49 in the second innings of the third test.
Lucky, particularly lucky. Look who's coming to pick him up.
Hey, aren't you Don Bradman?
Yes, that's right, laddie. Come on. Now listen, boys, you know I like playing cricket as well as you do. But if you want to play for Australia, there's something you must not do.
What's that?
Practice on the road. Too many children are hurt, and some are killed because they practice on the road. The park's the place for that.
You hear that, Don?
Yes, sure. Who's going to bowl the great Bradman? It'll have to be someone sound in every limb, because Don has played a safe bat to the world's best bowlers.
That was a beauty. Now, I want you children to promise me that you'll never be bowled over on the road. Never do the things we saw today. And what about you, boys and girls? Will you promise to? That's fine. So long, kids.
That was the first time that an Indian tour had ever taken place in Australia. They were a useful side without being a great side. They had a few individual players who performed well, but they didn't have the depth in the side, and really they were not quite good enough to match Australia, but they were a pleasant lot of fellows. They thoroughly enjoyed the tour. They appreciated the opportunity to play in Australia. Great sportsmen, and it was a very happy and very successful year.
Then came his last Test series and his last tour to England in 1948.
I can recall that we had a team meeting in Perth before we left Australia, and I gave the boys a bit of a pep talk over there and told them I had great confidence in the side. I thought we had great strength, great depth, and that we could more than match the opposition. I didn't really think at that stage we were going to be good enough to go through the tour undefeated. But I think I gradually instilled into them enough confidence to make them realise that this was possible. As the tour unfolded, they began to realise themselves how good the team was. Now, I felt that this was a very special tour in many respects. The first one we'd had to England after the war. It was 10 years since we'd had the one before. And I was going out of the game, and I wanted to go out on a high note, both for myself and for my players and for the country. So I went to great lengths to try and make sure that everything was all right. If I knew we had a function coming up at the British Sportsman's Club or something like that, I would go to some trouble to prepare some remarks that I felt were worthy of the occasion.
The Duke of Edinburgh graced the cricket writers' dinner in London, where he met Don Bradman. After saying this would be his last season in cricket, Don had some flattering remarks to offer about His Royal Highness as a cricketer.
I happened to be looking at a film of the life of His Royal Highness, and I detected in that film that he has a perfect action for a right-hand off-spin bowler. We have been accused at times of being ungenerous, so I submit that to the English selectors straight away. For their very serious consideration.
I was in England for 2 weeks and hadn't been to bed before 1 o'clock in the morning, which gives you an idea that I was working pretty hard. And as the tour went on, and as we were very successful, our mail increased enormously. I got to the stage at one point where my own personal mail reached 600 letters a day.
Every road led to Trent Bridge. Skies threatened, but the lure of the first Test match prevailed, and till the ground was full, the turnstiles clicked without interruption. No money was wanted back by 26,000 cricket fans. On a batsman's pitch, England were all out 165. Deplorable, but better than seemed likely. Not even the biggest optimist in Yardley's 11 expected Morris and Barnes and their 9 teammates to be dismissed cheaply. Edrich opened to Barnes in the last quarter of an hour of the day. Betzer bowled at the other end to Morris. The batsmen put on 73 before Laker bowled Morris next morning, and the monarch of all batsmen came to the wicket for the last Test match here at Trent Bridge. Australians looking on saw the captain weather a rather shaky start, and slowly, too slowly for the liking of the crowd, the score mounted, till by a boundary off Edrich, Bradman sent up the 100. With Hassett as partner, Bradman got his century after nearly 4 hours at the wicket with a boundary off Betzer. It was the great man's 18th Test match 100 against England. There was tremendous applause as he came in at the close of play.
You were caught Hutton bowled Betzer in your first 3 innings. Were they all in the leg trap?
Yes, well, the Englishmen had conjured up this new idea that they were going to attack me on the leg side with Alec bowling in-swingers with 2 or 3 leg slips. And it was a worry to me because not so much that I couldn't play it, but it was difficult to score from. And I used to get very impatient. I didn't like to be tied down, and therefore I attempted to score and paid the penalty by being caught. Alec, of course, was a very great bowler into the bargain, and I don't want to belittle him in any way, shape or form. And it was a tactic that they devised, and it paid off. I give him full marks for that, but if I'd been prepared to stay there and not score, I think I could have handled it without much trouble. But as I said earlier, I got impatient and I didn't like to do that. I tried to play shots.
Despite injuries, Compton and Edrich carried the England batting in the third test, and the Australian opener Sid Barnes was hit and badly hurt while fielding close to the bat.
He was obviously in great pain when carried off by the police and accompanied by an anxious Don Bradman.
Australia had won the first two tests comfortably. The third test ended in a draw.
Then the weather took a part, and England's chance of victory seemed to be receding. 10,000 people paid to sit in the rain in the hope that something would happen. The Headingley ground was packed for the fourth test, in spite of the fact that the question of the Ashes was already settled. Yardley made a fine start by winning the toss again, so the Aussies were in the field. Lindwall to Hutton, and the first run of the match. All Toshak's guile failed to break up the partnership. In fact, Bradman went through his bowlers. Here's Loxton in action. And Bill Johnston. Miller to Washbrook, a bumper and the usual booing. Ian Johnson. Of course, no test match in England this year would be complete without scenes like these. England took the field after scoring 496, and early successes rewarded our bowlers. Here's Hassett, caught crap, bowled Pollard, third tee. And Bradman, clean bowled by Pollard for 33. But Australia's youngest player, Harvey, came to the rescue. Not only was he playing in his first test over here at the age of 19, he also made a century.
Australia needed 404 runs to win in less than a day.
Most teams wouldn't even try for a win, you know, they just sort of try and bat out the day and perhaps end up with a draw, but it wasn't our intention to do that. And Bradman says, come on, we're going to give it a go. So they went out there, and Morris and he just showed us exactly how to go about it.
A 301-run partnership between Morris and Bradman won the match for Australia. No other team has ever won a test match with a score of more than 400 in the last innings.
At the end of each session, you know, we were in front of schedule, and yeah, it must have been magnificent for the public to watch something like that. You know, as you've seen the crowds on the screen, there was a chock-a-block ground, and I think that they got entertainment plus for their money.
Lindwall, 6 for 20, bowls Young for naught. England's record low total was naturally a sensation, but it was not the only surprise of the match.
We might have had a second innings, and so I was not aware that it was going to be my last innings. Neither was I aware at that stage that I only wanted 4 runs to have a test match average of 100. And it was a pretty emotional occasion because Yardley called all his fieldsmen around and they all gave me 3 cheers before I took block.
Enter Don Bradman, who got a great ovation. Then a special cheer on the field.
No, none of us ever, you know, thought of, well, I hope he makes 4, you know. In fact, I don't think it was even publicised all that much before the actual innings. We were just hoping, like everybody else at the ground, that he could finish off with a century again.
Well, it isn't often you get a big hand when you make a duck, but this was different.
I was a trifle unlucky in the sense that I played at the ball and actually hit it on the inside edge of the bat and pulled it onto the stumps. But I think if I'd taken a little bit more care, I might have got away with it. But that's one of the things that happens in the game of cricket.
Very sad. And of course, having bowled England out for 52, he didn't get another chance to bat. So that's the end of the one and only cricket career, because nobody will ever come near him.
On that dull Wednesday morning, the incomparable Don Bradman came out of the Oval for the last time as captain in a test match. The end came quickly. Eric Hollis had a go at one from Johnston and was caught by Morris. England were beaten by an innings and 149 runs.
Yes, it was a sad story for England, but there were very bright scenes at the Oval where everything was forgotten for the moment except the importance of paying tribute to Don Bradman. It must have been almost embarrassing for that great cricketer, but it must have been a very happy moment too. Yardley, who has described Don as the greatest cricketer of all time, called on the crowd to give him 3 special cheers, which they did with a will. During their stay at Balmoral, their Majesties invited the Australian cricketers, as well as the Scottish team they'd been playing, to tea at the castle. Duke of Edinburgh was there and had a chat with Don Bradman. The cricketers walked with the royal family in the grounds during this very happy and privileged occasion at the conclusion of their brilliantly successful tour.
I think there comes a time in every man's life, irrespective of whether he may still be good enough to carry on or not, that he should make way for a younger man. I feel that in my own case, and I think I'm probably the best judge of the many little creaks and groans that go on in my joints throughout the day, especially when we're out in the field, and I'm quite sure I shall have no regrets at all in having to sit in the pavilion and watch the other fellows. However, I do trust that in some other capacity I may be able to serve this wonderful game for many years to come.
Final farewells were exchanged on board the Orontes at Tilbury between Norman Yardley and Don Bradman.
We're very sorry to be going in a way because we're leaving so many good friends behind, but we'll naturally be glad to get back home again to our own folk. But I can assure you that the boys have all enjoyed their trip. I loved meeting you again, playing against your chaps, and I've loved all the hospitality which I've received in England. I'm sure we'll all be very glad to come back again as soon as we can. Bye now. Goodbye.
Farewell to the stage on which he'd been the star for 20 years. Back home, back to his family, to John and Shirley and his wife.
It was a bit sad to say, well, that's the end of my career as a player. And at that time, I never had any intention at all of playing another cricket match. The fact that I did play again was brought about because they very kindly agreed to play a testimonial match for me in Melbourne.
It was his last appearance on the Melbourne cricket ground. He played in a Sheffield Shield match and in 2 more testimonial games for other players. Then, the Don's career on the field was finished.
I stayed on the Australian Cricket Board for a very long time, I think some of the order of 30-odd years. And I was chairman for 2 3-year periods. I served on the committees of the South Australian Cricket Association for goodness knows how many years. And I think I served on the Australian Selection Committee for a total of about 35 years. So I think they were pretty reasonable contributions to the administration of the game, and that's the sort of thing I meant when I said I could serve the game in other capacities.
Does cricket still keep you busy these days?
No, not now, because I have no longer any connection with it at all. I'm not on any committee, and although I still go and have a look at the matches occasionally, and I have a great interest in it, and watch it both on television and at the ground sometime, I'm not obligated to do so, and in a sense it's a great relief that you haven't got to go. You go when you feel like it.
Do you still get a lot of mail on it?
Oh yes, that is absolutely astounding. I would think that apart from the 48 tour of England, which I mentioned before, when the mail was absolutely horrendous, I would honestly think that I get just as much mail today as I ever got in my life, and it is quite common for me to have to spend 3 or 4 hours a day just dealing with the mail.
If you could pick a moment to live over again, what would it be?
Oh, well, I don't think I want to talk about my private life. There might have been a lot of moments in my private life that I remember with great pleasure, but I think on the cricket field, probably the most exhilarating time was when we won that test match at Leeds, and we scored over 400 in the last innings on a worn wicket, which was a performance that no team in history had ever accomplished before. That, of course, sealed the Ashes for us on that 48 tour. There are many times that in your career you play a good innings which gives you great pleasure at the time. For instance, that one when I played against Fleetwood Smith in Sydney. But that's rather different because that's really a personal satisfaction to achieve something, whereas what I'm talking about was an achievement for your team and your country to win the Ashes. But of course there are many very exhilarating moments that you think of very often in the middle of the night when you can't go to sleep.
Thank you, Sir Donald.
Pleasure.